Good afternoon and welcome to the MIT System Design and Management Program's Systems Thinking webinar series. My name is Lois Slavin. I'm the Communications Director for SDM, and I'm here with Stephen DeRocher, our technical guru, and the esteemed and very well-loved Professor Joe Sussman. We're very honored to have him presenting today on understanding and designing complex socio-technical systems. Before he begins, I'd like to invite you to enter any questions that you have in the chat section addressed to everyone, and Professor Sussman will include a Q&A at the end of his presentation. And with that, I turn it over to Professor Sussman.
This is Joe Sussman. I serve as a faculty member at MIT, and it's a pleasure to have a chance to talk with all of you. I want to talk today about the notion of understanding and designing complex socio-technical systems. So let me start with a lighthearted comment that perhaps has some salience with some of you. You've heard of Lawrence Pita, who some years ago wrote the Pita Principle, invented the Pita Principle. The notion of that, by the way, was organizations eventually come to full stop because people tend to get promoted to their level of incompetence when they can't handle the job anymore, and so you end up with a hierarchy with people who are who are not effective in their particular job. It's tongue in cheek, but only partially so on the basis of some empirical evidence. But he commented in a humorous way, some problems are so complex that you have to be highly intelligent and well-informed just to be undecided about them. We'll talk about some of them here today. So there are two linked concepts that I'm going to talk about. The idea of critical contemporary issues, linking those to complex socio-technical systems. So we need some definitions here in order. So we all have our own list of what we might call critical contemporary issues, CCIs for short, and this is not an unfamiliar list to many of you, I'm sure. We have issues like global climate change and some of the implications it may have for our life on this planet. More generally, energy and environmental issues, as we know, of course, that energy is a driver of economic growth, and yet it has environmental impacts that we have to be concerned about. The idea of what's going on in the developing world, developing countries, and megacities in them in particular, as representing an important set of opportunities as well as problems. Globalization, global economy, you open the newspaper any day of the week and you'll see something that relates to the one world concept in terms of communication and transporting of goods all around the planet. National security is perhaps one that occasionally, and in fact often, as our friends in Korea continue to rattle their rockets, is on people's minds. And these things, by the way, are often linked. There was a recent talk by one of the members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who when asked to characterize what the major national security issue we faced, in particular in Asia, and the answer that he had was global climate change, that the shifts that will happen on the planet as a result is a national security issue for the United States. Productivity, mobility, we could go on and on with these. Cybersecurity would be yet another. So we face some quite substantial problems, and they're all linked, as I said a moment ago, in the context of national security. We had Lady Bird Johnson some years back, who was the first lady in the United States in the 1960s. Her husband was Lyndon Baines Johnson. And her thing, while she was first lady, was highway beautification. And she saw all the issues that are interconnected. This is an insightful quote from her. Everything is connected to everything else. Recreation, pollution, mental health, crime rate, transportation, war on poverty, parks, everything leads to something else. I recall being in China a few years back, and one of the professors there was basically suggesting you can't just solve one problem. We were talking, it was in 2007, the year before the Olympic Games, and we were talking about the airport access that people would need as they flew in for the Olympics, and we started to talk about other things that had to be done in order to improve that, and he said, you can't fix just one thing. You need to fix often a lot of things reflecting that same interconnection. So, complex socio-technical systems. Again, we often use CSS as the shorthand for that. So let's parse this. Systems you, I'm guessing, all know quite a bit about. In graphical terms, we have a composition of interconnected components and subsystems. They're often structured hierarchically. Usually they interact with the environment external to it, so-called open systems, and that's certainly the kind we're interested in. And you can see there's, if you will, a hierarchical structure on the left. We've got our CSS. You can see it at 3 o'clock on the circle on the left, and it interacts with systems in parallel to it, and they collectively form a larger system, and the boundary of that larger system is shown. But then on the right, you can look explicitly at our CSS, which is in turn composed of subsystems, and then there's the boundary of our CSS. So you can see this diagram is basically the same, but at different levels of the hierarchy, and we need to be cognizant of the interrelationships of these. Each of the subsystems of our CSS, you could do the same breakout into a set of subsystems of those subsystems. So this is, when we use the term systems, that's what we mean. And socio-technical, we've written papers on what socio-technical systems is supposed to mean, and here we'll use the intuitive definition. It clearly is a system that contains important technological subsystems and components, and it also has substantial societal, political, economic relevance and impact. And our sense is that we argue that complex socio-technical systems underlie virtually all of the critical contemporary issues that we deal with. And since MIT and any number of other organizations see dealing with those critical contemporary issues as quite important, we clearly need to develop a way of dealing with complex socio-technical systems if we are to advance on those critical contemporary issues. So that's, if you will, the underlying rationale for why we're talking about systems of this type. Now, what we haven't parsed is complexity, and complexity again has many definitions. Indeed, some years ago, perhaps 8 or 10 by now, I wrote a paper called 20 Views of Complexity, which basically was a synthesis of 20 different authors and what they had to say about complexity, and tried to relate them one to another. You'll be relieved to know I'm not going to go through 20 types of complexity here today, But there are a few I'd like to point out that have special importance in what we're going to be talking about here. The first two, structural and behavioral complexity, again, I'm guessing those ideas are not unfamiliar to this audience. Structural complexity arises because of the complicatedness, if you will, the large number of components and subsystems within a particular system, and the high degree of connectivity between them. So structurally, you look at it, and it's a very rich set of nodes and links that make it difficult to understand. And behavioral complexity is, in a sense, the other side of that coin. We have behavior that emerges due to those interactions, and the implication of structural complexity is that we almost have behavioral complexity, which makes it very difficult to make predictions of what will happen to a complex system if we make changes parametrically, structurally, what have you. So those are ideas that you've heard before. Here are two more that we thought about a lot here at MIT. We have what we call evaluative complexity, which basically suggests that we have many different stakeholders working that are interested in the performance of the system, and those stakeholders may have quite different views of what good system performance actually means. That is, the metrics of system performance may be quite different among stakeholders. So, for example, I live in suburban Boston, fly in and out of Logan quite a bit, and from my point of view, an expansion of Logan Airport to make it a more effective and more efficient node in the air transportation network is very important to me, and I'd like to see that happen. But you could imagine somebody living in the proximity of Logan International Airport who feels they've already got an enormous amount of noise pollution, they've already got a fair amount of traffic associated with Logan. They just as soon not see it expanded. Perhaps they rarely fly. So even if we're able to come up with a technique that allows us to quote-unquote improve Logan's performance, I may think it's a very good idea. The people close to the airport impacted by it, paying the noise and pollution costs, may see it in a very different way. So even if we're able to solve behavioral complexity, that is, we're able to make reasonable predictions of what will happen if we expand, say, runway capacity at Logan, even if we're able to do that, and often we're not, but if we were, we still wouldn't necessarily know what to do because of these conflicting views among stakeholders. And when we're operating in the socio-technical realm, that's important. And then we have what I call nested complexity, which I go into a bit more detail in the next chart. We have nested complexity, which suggests we have a physical system, and here it's shown as a plane. So, for example, the transportation system of Mexico City is a physical system with quite a bit of complexity associated with it, but it is embedded in an institutional sphere on which we show the organizations that are concerned with the management, coordination, investment, whatever it may be, on our physical system. So we would have, in the case of the Mexico City megacity, we'd have a highly complex physical system, buses, a metro, individual automobiles, and so on and so forth, to say nothing of some of the environmental issues that one would have to understand physically. But the institutional sphere that has organizations on it, like the Ministry of Transportation, the Ministry of the Environment, various stakeholder groups that may exist within the city, other regulators and so forth, that's equally complex on an institutional rather than physical dimension. And what happens is, in effect, we're trying to quote-unquote manage or control a physical system with an institutional sphere that's quite complex in its own right, and may in fact not be in any sense the optimal set of organizations to deal with, say, in the case of Mexico City, the relationship between transportation and the mobility that we prize, but impacted by the environmental aspects of cars and buses and colectivos, what have you, running around the system. So we've given you a little bit of a flavor of two kinds of complexities you might not have thought about: evaluative and nested complexity. There are, of course, many more complex things we can talk about. One of the, in my view, the patron saints in this area of complex socio-technical systems was Herbert Simon, for many years at Carnegie Mellon, a Nobel Prize winner, and he introduces the idea that the performance of a system relates to the decisions that people make about how to use it. So again, drawing on transportation, which is my own chosen complex socio-technical system, we have people that are making choices about whether to ride on the MBTA here in Boston, or take their own car, or take commuter rail, or any number of other kinds of choices they may have to make, which would include, in that particular application, land use choices, where you work, where you live, and so on. Those people are making those choices, and the system performs in a particular way. On the left side, though, I have rational in quotes, saying that it's not always obvious what rationality means in this context. We've got the complexity of human decision makers participating in this process as well, and that implies, again, difficulty in measuring the performance of our system. We may, as technocrats, as transportation professionals, say, well, it's only rational for people to make decisions in particular ways about mode choice, but those self-same people may see rationality in a different way, and the performance of our system may in fact deteriorate as a result. And this work of Simon's, as you can see, goes back more than a half century. People have been thinking about these issues for many, many years. So, in terms of the approach that we are suggesting to the study of complex socio-technical systems, I show it in this graphic. And we have the horizontal bar, integrative domain knowledge. One has to one has to come to the study of this system thinking very broadly about what the domain is. So if I'm coming to the system to study a transportation system, my integrative domain knowledge should include a good understanding of how my domain, that is transportation, how that relates to the energy system, the environmental system, the economic development system, and so on and so forth. I have to have a broad view of where my domain fits in with its connected domains, some of those I mentioned. On the left-hand side, I have what we call systems-oriented methods. Here I am talking about methods like operations research, stochastic systems, econometrics, usually quantitative and mathematical in their treatment of the domain we're trying to study. And of course, many of us have spent many years doing that kind of quantitative analysis of systems, and those methods are very important in the context of complex socio-technical systems. And then the right-hand side, I show if you will, the softer side. I talk now about social sciences, I talk about management, I talk about planning. Often these are qualitative in nature. So one looks at how one considers and evaluates the presence of various kinds of stakeholders, and how one, if you will, analyzes that, usually qualitatively. And I emphasize the fact that there is such a thing called qualitative analysis. Many engineers, when they say analysis, quantitative is implicit, but not here. Here we're talking about having a broader understanding that requires us to have a qualitative set of tools as well. And these two embrace, if you will, our integrative domain knowledge to allow us to advance our understanding of complex socio-technical systems. And the vertical bars show the deep roots of quantitative engineering science, in which many schools of engineering around the country, around the world, including MIT, have invested substantially to get a fundamental understanding of how systems work, how components work, and our challenge is to integrate that deep quantitative engineering science knowledge into a framework that can be more a mixture of quantitative and qualitative thinking. So, as soon as we put that diagram up, we recognize that there is a shortfall between it and at least part of the title of this talk, that we as engineers want to go beyond simply studying, that is, observing the system of interest. We want to actually design it. We want to advance it and improve its performance. So we are not simply observers watching the system to see what happens and deriving some understanding from it. The CSSs that we work on are purposeful. The transportation system of Boston or Mexico City has a purpose, the transportation of people and goods around, in that case, an urban area. So we have a purpose, so we have to have a normative view of what does good performance mean before we can try to improve a system. We have to get some idea of what good performance means, and we need performance measures. And of course, many of you will quickly realize that evaluative complexity comes to the fore very quickly. But we also need a prescriptive view. That is, we're at a particular place now. We want to get to a better place, as defined in the third bullet, good performance. The question is how we go about making our system perform better. So that's a major leap in which we really have to think quite deeply and broadly about our system and its performance and how one goes about improving it. But in the final bullet, I also recognize that humility has to be a part of this process. We are often surprised by negative emergent properties that one brings into that occur when we make changes. So understanding that we have to be cautious and careful is, in my view, a fundamental part of this process. We have to have the confidence to move forward, but we have to recognize that first we should do no harms, as our medical colleagues like to say. So this diagram is basically the same as the two before, except I've replaced the word, I've included, I should say, the word design, implying that we are going to take some actions to improve the behavior of this complex socio-technical systems using using all the tools that are demonstrated in this package. So now we have to think about what the intellectual content of what we're about as we begin to think about designing a complex socio-technical system. So I've said that the integrated view of a domain is important. That could be transportation, reaching out to energy and the environment. It could be the economic system of the U.S. integrating with transportation and manufacturing and so on and so forth. And with further the integration of various methods, systems-oriented methods, they were on the left-hand side of the previous, social science, management and planning, and undergirded by engineering science. So the question one needs to ask as we embark upon this journey about thinking about complex socio-technical systems is there some intellectual content in that act? And I would argue that indeed it's almost self-evident that there is intellectual content as one begins to study various issues. So I've mentioned Mexico City, and in this particular case, studying transportation and the environment. I was involved in a project working on precisely this. It was PI'd by Mario Molina, who is a Nobel laureate, winning that in atmospheric chemistry, and a Mexican national. At the time, he was a prof here at MIT, and he was very anxious to study the environment in that great megacity. And there were various pieces to it. There was my piece that dealt with transportation. There were other pieces that dealt with pollution caused by people doing their own cooking, caused by power plant operating on dirty sources of fuel, and so on and so forth. So Molina integrated this big program. I had the transportation piece. So the context here is Mexico City is one of the largest megacities, 20 million plus in the world, and the economics of Mexico are deeply embedded or deeply affected by how Mexico City is working. There are tremendous mobility problems as the country gets richer and more and more people buy cars. You have severe mobility problems, and that has productivity implications with obvious economic implications. There are very important technological aspects to it. How one runs the transportation system, how one controls traffic, and so on and so forth, are fundamental to looking at this problem. Severe environmental problems with health issues, particularly those at the left-hand tail and right-hand tail of the age distribution. Young children and elderly people suffer particularly in that context. There are social equity issues, the idea that as we make decisions about transportation and the environment, as we make these decisions, we have to be doing it in such a way that the pluses and minuses are spread over the population of the country. If we improve the productivity of the transportation system, the top 1% of the people in Mexico benefit from it, and there's not much benefit trickling down, one would worry about whether social equity was part and parcel of our strategies. And finally, the institutional sphere is quite complex. That I was discussing that when I talked about nested complexity, and it's sometimes quite dysfunctional. The way in which various organizations, public and private, interact in the theater of transportation and the environment is quite complex, and sometimes it's dysfunctional. It doesn't really work well at all. So I would argue that this is a prima facie case that there is intellectual content in this integration of these various methods to study problems at the Mexico City scale. So let's assume that I get mostly buy-in on that question, that people agree with that. But having, if you will, passed that test, or at least I'm claiming we passed it, I argue there's a more important test that complex socio-technical systems has to pass in order to make the statement that there is intellectual content in that kind of work. And the way I couch the question, as I raise the bar, if you will, is, are there principles and core underlying concepts for creating this integrated approach across domains? Is there a transferable residue, is the term I used? And what I'm trying to suggest here is we should have methods and concepts that would be important, would be important and usable if we move to quite a different domain. This could be a different transportation domain in a different climate, in a different country, at different economic scales. It could be studying something entirely different, a manufacturing supply chain, for example. Are there ideas that are, if you will, domain independent, that are part and parcel of studying complex socio-technical systems? And here I would suggest this is really a work in progress, as people at a variety of academic institutions and research facilities work at creating the underpinnings of this field. And what I present here now is, if you will, a sense of a progress report as to where we are at this point in time. So we've gone beyond simply saying, hey folks, we work on really complicated problems. Of course there's intellectual content. I've gone beyond that to say there have to be some underlying principles that we can apply that are domain independent for there really to be complex socio-technical systems considered to be, if you will, a field of study, a term I've used in the past. So there are various principles and concepts, as I said, a work in progress that we've advanced. Here are several of them. I think I have about 10 or 15 listed. I'll go through them, of course, very quickly. The micro-macro question deals with how at what level one has to understand the detailed behavior of a system, the microstructure, even the nanostructure in the case of materials, to ask and answer reasonable questions at the macro level. So, what does one have to know in detail about the Mexico City Metro in terms of how it performs to answer questions about the Mexico City transportation / environmental system in its entirety? So micro-macro is important. You'll see this in your work, I am sure. Second is what we call here at MIT and in other places as well, of course, the enterprise viewpoint. So when one is looking at an organization, the idea of reaching out horizontally, if you will, to understand how that works, we get off, if you will, in the manufacturing setting. We get off the factory floor while understanding the importance of it, and understand how the enterprise as a whole behaves, where R&D, where marketing, where management, and so on and so forth come into play. Many of you have heard people like Joel Moses and others talk about the so-called ilities, words that end in ility, although as it turns out they don't always end in ility, but flexibility, expandability, quality, and so forth. These are properties that show up during the whole life cycle of a complex socio-technical system. We need to bring that perspective to the table. The idea of flexibility, one of the illities, and resilience, another illity, although the suffix obviously isn't illity, but understanding how design can be advanced by looking at how flexibility can be enhanced in the sense of not locking in early for particular decisions, but rather studying systems so that we retain some resilience, if you will, as situations in the environment change. Then I talk about sustainability, again an illity, and I for one argue this is an overarching design principle for complex sociotechnical systems. I recognize there's a certain ideology in this perspective, but I believe this should be fundamental. The 3 E's of sustainability: economic development, environmental protection, social equity, should all be part and parcel of the decisions that we make as we try to enhance the performance of a complex socio-technical system. To continue, we've talked about both qualitative and quantitative methods. These need to be used rigorously, and we insist, as do our social science colleagues, that there is such a thing, indeed a well-defined thing, of rigor in the context of qualitative analysis. Talk to a historian and you'll get some sense about what rigor means there. It's not simply the mathematical rigor that we get when we do quantitative methods, but we ought to do this in such a way that it is in tandem that we apply these qualitative and quantitative methods. We have to think of methodology in an integrative sense as well. I argue that we need to focus on feasibility of our solutions. Optimality in the kinds of systems we usually deal in when we're talking about complex socio-technical systems would be nice, but it's usually beyond the pale. We usually can't approach that, and we're usually happy if we can find a few feasible solutions to select those the way forward. Understanding and measuring complexity is something that we've recognized can go across domains. The idea of using system architecting and system of systems architecting as an organizing principle is something that has a lot of currency. And then this is my final set of principles and concepts. The idea that uncertainty is critical. Identifying, quantifying uncertainties that we have, and this is, of course, needs to be done in an environment in which we have what has been called unknown unknowns. There are unknowns we don't even know about yet. That presents a very challenging design environment. We need to learn to create strategies for dealing with them. So. My colleague, for example, Richard D'Onofrio, who works on real options, studies exactly how those strategies can be created. My colleague, Nancy Levison, has done some seminal work in system safety. In her textbook, I would argue she's fundamentally changed the way we all should think about system safety, and thinking of it as an emergent property of a complex socio-technical system, and one that one has to approach from a highly systematized and systems thinking manner. And finally, recognizing the importance of context. Dan Roos, who was, I guess is, the founding director of ESD, always emphasized that as a critical aspect of what we do. So that's just a starter list. I'm sure others will have additional ones. I'd love to hear about them if you do. And it's all related to this quote. Peter Drucker was, of course, the great management guru for 50 or 60 years, and wrote kind of a book a year for his career. He was really remarkably prolific. and I love to read him. And in this particular case, Drucker is quoting the great English novelist Forster, that he wrote Room Without a View, I am told, which was also a major motion picture, as people say. And Forster talked about only connecting. And Drucker played off that to say the ability to connect raises the yield of existing knowledge, and learning how to make those connections is a learnable skill, which struck me as virtually a definition of how one should be teaching about complex socio-technical systems. Now, I should emphasize that this field did not fall from the sky. We didn't invent it at MIT, and I'm guessing most of the people on this phone call did not invent it either. There's quite a significant history of distinguished people, progenitors of this field, and certainly here in our graduate program, our ESD PhD program, Professor Chris McGee and I, who teach the introductory PhD seminar, draw upon these authors and others who one could argue laid the foundation. Herbert Simon, I've already mentioned, Norbert Wiener and cybernetics, Jay Forrester, system dynamics, Schumpeter, the famous economist von Neumann, the polymath who basically architected our first computers. There are others one could name. You probably have your favorites as well, but I just wanted to make it clear this didn't come out of nowhere. There is an important set of people who've done considerable work in this area as well. So Jay Forrester is one that I mentioned, and he wrote a book about basically his collected papers over the course of several decades. And Dean Gordon Brown, the Dean of Engineering at MIT in the 60s, in the 70s was asked to write a preface to Forrester's book. And I found that to be quite enlightening as well. He suggested that Forrester's book might have better be titled Seeking to Understand Today's Complex Society, where living in a world where everything affects everything else, as Lady Bird Johnson stated. And scholars have tried to do that interdisciplinary, cross-disciplinary approach. So, as this is a quote from the foreword of Brown, the disciplines of operations research, econometrics, to name a few, have been developed and applied, but our problems escalate and new and more powerful approaches are needed. And we argue that those new and more powerful approaches relate to this integration. And one reason that this particular quote tickled me so is Dean Brown was a seminal dean at MIT in the area of engineering sciences back in the immediately post-World War II era and into the 50s and 60s. He pioneered that deep engineering science perspective, getting engineering away from the purely empirical way in which it often was practiced and taught. But here he is saying we need more of a systems approach. So I really like the source of that wisdom. So a legitimate question: why now? People have talked for decades about getting people to integrate across disciplines. Academic institutions are particularly sticky about doing that. So why is it especially important now as we sit here in the early years of the 21st century? And I argue that it is because our issues, critical contemporary issues, we have a responsibility to face them, and complex socio-technical systems are at the root of virtually all of them. We now have tools, techniques, technologies, principles, concepts to work across these disciplines, and we can make every attempt to do so. Not least in information technology, we have an extraordinary ability to process data. Nowadays, we talk about big data, have a large set of tools at our disposal to allow us to move forward in this way, and we should. So engineering systems is the name of my unit, and I haven't really said too much about engineering systems, and that's simply because, by my definition, complex socio-technical systems and engineering systems are synonymous virtually. I'm not sure everybody at MIT or elsewhere would agree with that definition, but from my point of view, when we speak about engineering systems, we're talking about CSSs. And the list of bullets here are things that we've talked about already here today: technology-enabled networks, mass energy information, large-scale socio-technical aspects, nested complexity, dynamic, they change over time, uncertainty, and deeply rigorous quantitative and qualitative approaches. So that's what we've really been talking about. There are any numbers of examples one could talk about and that have been studied here at MIT and in many cases in my group, just because I was more familiar directly with them than with others. But you've heard about the Mexico City project. There are IT projects related to blogs and the like, Cape Wind, an offshore energy farm in Nantucket Sound, and how complex that gets, particularly from an evaluative point of view, air combat and organizational infrastructure to help us advance our abilities to be victorious in the air. This was an Air Force colonel who worked in this area. Broadband telecommunication services provided by small municipal electric utilities that have the network and have the customer base. Regional transportation planning coupled with supply chain management, developing broadband access in developing countries. I had a student, a Kenyan by heritage, who worked on this and is now back in Kenya trying to actually advance this agenda. So there's a pretty broad set of areas one can look at. And I'm thinking a bit about the future now, the future of engineering systems and CSSs that I view, as I said, as synonymously. We address these critical contemporary issues using the CSS approach, and this integrated interdisciplinary approach is a pathway for the relevance of universities in a society where relevance is demanded of all institutions, and especially universities. It's demanded of the public sector. It's demanded of the private sector. It's demanded of people who study the interaction of labor and management. It's true in the context of manufacturing and its economic spin-offs. All these are vital to society, and academia has to contribute to those areas. And indeed, President Raphael Reif of MIT, who came in July of 2012, 9 months or so ago, has embraced the idea that MIT has to focus on some of these world-scaled problems and contribute to their solution. Problem-driven research is a term that's often used. And I would argue that to do that, having complex socio-technical systems as a field of study, that's the way we can make continuing contributions to advancing our knowledge and advancing the state of the planet in these critical contemporary issues areas. So that takes me just about to the end. I had some backups, but and I may still use them if, in fact, there are any questions that lead me to need any of them. But we've got 7 or 8 minutes, I guess, and Lois and the others, can I can I see the questions? If you're asking me if I can see what's in micro dots,
you could read them off of your machine, or
help me with that, please. You gotta be kidding. That's all of them?
There's more.
There'll be more, yeah.
Are you at the top of the list now?
I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I could use this in a Word document. You know, these old eyes don't focus on microprint very well.
I could just read them aloud for the sake of the recording.
Okay, why don't you do that?
Sure. Our first question is, I'm curious to understand why nested complexity means that a physical domain is always contained within an institutional sphere. In particular, your previous discussion of systems makes it clear that any system is part of a broader system and also contains other subsystems. Why are not each of these subsystems and systems in fact sociotechnical? Thus, rather than nesting all the technical physical does not contain software.
That was parenthetic at the end. That's an excellent question, Brian. Thank you for that. I think it's an astute observation. The idea is that this nesting can continue as one goes down more in the micro detail. That each of the subsystems of, say, your CSS may have an institutional sphere of its own that we have to deal with. That is important to understand if we're going to understand how that subsystem contributes to the CSS. So that's entirely right. In terms of your point of view on physical does not contain software, I use physical in the broadest sense. That is, we're talking about parts of a complex socio-technical system that are not the organizational part. So software doesn't have an artifact, and many processes don't have artifacts, but we still use the generic term physical, which in this case you can read as meaning not organizational. So in some of my work on the Clios process, some of you may have read some of my work on that. We talk about a Clios process that looks at systems by segregating the institutions and organizations from the rest of the system. And those organizations project down to the physical system in various ways and bounce off the physical systems and may affect other institutional entities. So a regulatory agency would be on the institutional sphere, and it may project down on the physical sphere, the physical planes, things like regulations, and those regulations might in fact then project up to some other institutional actor. So the terms need to be understood in that context, but that's an excellent point. And now we have another question. It says, Chris, good question. I'm not understanding that.
I think we could skip down to how does the approach or model proposed by Professor Sussman relate to the socio-technical systems theory developed by researchers at the Tavistock Institute in the 1950s?
I think it's, I don't have that question up here, so I don't want to ask you to say it again. Certainly, as I indicated when I mentioned some of the giants in the field, that we see ourselves building upon the work of others. There are a variety of approaches that people have taken, both here at MIT and elsewhere. So certainly the Tavistock Institute work is something that we've looked at, and there are any number of ways of comparing those approaches. I haven't done that here today, But yes, we are aware and understand the importance of that contribution. Here at MIT, there are several approaches that we've also considered as one tries to study these systems. One is the work of Rhodes and Nightingale on system architecting and what they call the 8 views of that one can take from an organizational point of view, an architectural point of view, to give further insight and ways of moving forward. Another is the work that Professor Don Lassard at the Sloan School has done, focused in particular on large-scale infrastructure systems, which are a subclass of what I've been talking about here, and how one, to use his term, shapes the approach to these, and that also has this combination of qualitative and quantitative as one goes forward on that. So yes, those are good questions as well. Are you picking, or?
I'll read them. I'll read them aloud. What is the relationship between embedded work culture and the design of a CSS architecture? Can an architecture respond to behaviors that are hidden and/or slow to change within the horizon of the design problem? Are interfaces in the CSS a means to promote or prevent the interaction of disparate CSS behaviors?
That's a long question. I wish I could read it so that I could.
Text is too small.
No, I don't even see it on my screen. Is it the one that's there now?
Mm-hmm.
From David Feliciano?
No, I just sent it to you. It should be at the very bottom.
Yeah, it says from David Feliciano to everyone. In order for CSS principles, etc. Can you read it to me again?
Sure.
I didn't.
Let's get down to that one. We can do that one. In order for CSS principles and concepts to be effective, it is clear to me that collaboration is essential, since the amount of integrative domain knowledge required is considerable. In light of this, how do we begin to address the culture of specialization and siloed expertise that can sometimes exist in both academia and industry?
Another excellent question. You're doing a good job of picking out the ones for me to answer. This is going to have to be the last one, because I know people have scheduled only till 1, and I, in fact, have a meeting over on the other side of campus in just a few minutes. I'm sorry, this is bouncing around too much.
Would you like me to repeat it?
Oh, no, I see it now. It's just the screen is moving as we're going through it, and I lose it. You put your finger, David, on I think a vital question that is, given the siloed nature, and I'll focus on the academic side of academia, where people get promoted and tenured and the like by drilling down very deeply in an area, as opposed to creating integrative knowledge. That's a very meaningful question on this campus and other campuses as well. So that's a strategic issue. That's not something that's going to get solved overnight, in terms of creating organizational structures that allow us to advance on that dimension. Some fields, I think, have moved forward more effectively than others in taking that point of view. As I've mentioned, I'm a transportation guy, and was a transportation guy before I was a systems guy. And I think transportation, in my view, has been in the forefront of thinking in that kind of integrative way, going back to the 1960s and forward to this very day. That field has certainly tried to integrate many different points of view, both hard and soft, and it's a tough pull, because in our case, different academic departments may have different views of what the important issues in transportation are like, and are perhaps hiring faculty to support those kinds of views. But when one tries to put together research that's more integrative, sometimes that's a hard sell in the traditional ways of evaluating people. So the Engineering Systems Division at MIT, that is a cross-cutting unit in the School of Engineering, is certainly one approach to it. It's not anything that's going to get solved overnight. We often debate here on this campus about where we are relative to industry on this question of integrating the silos. And in particular, several of us were at a meeting with some senior industry people, and we're discussing material not unlike what I've discussed today, talking about the need to integrate the hard, the soft, and these folks were saying, well, that's very interesting, but what's new? That's how we do it. We take that kind of integrative approach. We need to do that to satisfy our own clients. So whether we are in fact advancing, whether we are more advanced than industry is far from clear to me. I think we've got a ways to go, and we need to do it in a scholarly, codified way as people interested in complex socio-technical systems. And we've been very encouraged to see that happen. There's an organization that MIT helped with others to stand up called CSUN, which stands for the Council of Engineering Systems Universities, which now has 50-plus universities as members across the globe that are working together to try and make good things happen in exactly the way you were discussing in your question, David. So I'm going to have to stop now and let me thank you for listening to me and these ideas. I'd be delighted. I'm presuming my email address is available to anybody. Sussman at mit.edu. You can write to me. You can take a look at my website and see some direct references. But I'm happy to hear. I'd be happy to hear from you. My apologies for the couple of minutes at the beginning where we had some technical difficulties. And while I can't hear you, I'm sure I'm virtually getting a standing ovation from the crowd as we speak. That's a joke, everyone. That's a joke. Okay, thanks a lot. And thanks to Lois and SDM for making this platform available to me.
Thank you, Professor Sussman, and thank you all for joining us. Professor Sussman's presentation recording and his slides will be available on the SDM website later this week, and everyone who's registered will be getting a notification and a link to that, as well as Professor Sussman's email address. I'd like to invite you all to our next webinar, which is Monday, April 22nd. Our speaker is Professor Richard de Neufville, who will be speaking on flexibility in engineering design. We hope you will join us, and thank you again for coming today.